now, you call it a blow if you want. But then for us, when we look at this particular issue, you will say it is the courts that are exercising their constitutional mandate in the country. And I want you to listen to this particular statement, which you'd also agree that majority of Kenyans share that particular sentiment. Because now when it comes to the courts, then you can't call it a sentiment, then it becomes just a ruling that sends the executive back to the drawing board. And this is a statement that it is our considered view that it was not the intention of the framers of the Constitution to create positions of 50 chief administrative secretaries to deputize 22 cabinet secretaries. It is a question that majority of Kenyans asked. In what way are we going to make sense of 50 CASs when indeed we do have 22 cabinet secretaries? The explanation, not black and white really, to the point that indeed some ministries had 5 CASs. So in this question of the legality of the cabinet administrative secretaries now, it is done and dusted. And guess what? Since it's not a matter sitting in court right now, we can talk about it whichever, however, whatever way that we want as Kenyans this morning. With the question being, is the president getting it wrong from the onset? Because indeed, for a man who came in our office telling Kenyans that, well, we are going to run thin, how is it then that we will turn around and talk about 50 cabinet chief administrative secretaries and 22 ministries in the country? Is that not where the question should begin? And then does that also point us to look into the other things that he is indeed getting wrong? Seated with us right here are conservatory orders from the courts that have barred the government from implementing the Finance Act 2023. And if you don't know what I'm saying, it is a Finance Act because indeed the president, while aware that there were cases seated in the court, went ahead and signed it into law. You would say he was performing his mandate. But then when you turn around and start comparing the biggest blame for one Uhuru Kenyatta, that is the former president of the Republic of Kenya, majority of people said that it was a man who couldn't listen to the courts in the country. Is that the same question that we need to ask this morning? That indeed, Mr. President, if you can't listen to the complaints of your citizens, then are the courts going to stop you? This morning, the big conversation is on what next, because the only explanation that we got from some of these appointments is that the president, in one way or another, had to find a way to reward his close allies in the campaign process that essentially saw him get into office. So since now it looks as if that particular route has been blocked, what next? For the 50 CASs, we're still looking at the president and saying, gotta find a way. This is Lookuptv. My name is Simba Kiage. Thank you very much for choosing to begin your day with us right here at Lookuptv. This is the Morning Drift. We are online on Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. And guess what? The hashtag is the Morning Drift. Let me just then take you shortly to exactly what it is you're waking up to this morning in your newspapers. Welcome back. This is the Morning Drift. My name is Simba Kiage. Again, let's then jump into the Standard this morning, and that's the biggest headline that you expected to wake up to this morning. It's called CAS Judges Deal RUTO a body blow. And that's what they're saying. The President William Ruto is between a rock and a hard place on what will use to reward his cronies after the courts found the Chief Administrative Secretary position unconstitutional. The move will save taxpayers 187 million shillings in salaries over the 4 years that they would have served. That story has been covered on page 4. It's a big story. The majority of Kenyans then are waking up to this morning, and indeed it's a story that has essentially taken headlines across the country. Now, this is exactly what they said, that the court said the CSS cannot assume office without vetting and approval by Parliament. That's one. And number two, in a dissenting judgment, Justice Hedwig Mundi says there is justification for the position. If you listen to that particular ruling, it was not essentially unanimous in terms of that ruling. They say, well, there is justification for that position, but then the Constitution essentially also does stop the government from essentially having these particular positions. Now, again, as we wake up this morning, again, we're going to talk about another big issue that Ruto, again, has to deal with this morning, because lawyers now are also seeking to block 4 from cabinet meetings. Indeed, if you look at that petition that has been filed, then indeed, again, the question of the legality of these particular advisors that have then essentially been assumed to sit in the cabinet are also going to be challenged in the court. So page 4, you're going to read about that, and this morning we're essentially going to get into that as well, as we ask the question, is the law being broken in the early days of President William Ruto's tenure? All right, go back to the first page as well. You're going to look at how the health sector now has essentially gone through hits and misses. With that story on the front page, also covered heavily on page 6 of the Standard. And if you look at what the bigger miss here that has been highlighted by the Standard is that violence, we're now at 34% of women and 27% of men aged 15 to 49. You can see actually that indeed violence still is prevalent to the female gender in the country. Again, if you look at where we have been, water, that 80% of households in the country have an improved source of drinking water, with 94% in urban and 71% in rural areas. Remember, this is a big win for the country, because if you look at the SDG goals, then you will see that by 2030 we should be getting to 100% in this particular segment. Now you can actually see that employment earnings, that 77% of married women reported being employed in the 12 months before this particular survey. Read that story on page 6 of the Standard. And on page 7, you're going to read about Raila now says that a protest will not end until we see good results. That story has also been covered heavily on the website for Lookuptv. That's at www.lookuptv.co.ke. Once you're there, then you know, comment, a like, and a subscription essentially would be appreciated. Good. That's exactly what you're going to meet on the Standard this morning. And now farmers are also smiling this morning because they will soon be able to supply potatoes to KFC. That story is on the Business Standard on the page 26. I think that's it. Good. All right, let's cross over to the Daily Nation this morning, so we can also see what they have essentially given limelight in this particular paper. Good. Now, bigger headline is on the illegality of those CIS positions. It is second-time positions dished out mostly to poll losers. They have been nullified. Now they're telling you exactly why the court threw out Ruto's 50 CISs. And indeed, what the judges said, they said that accordingly, the newly created office and fresh complement of 50 had to comply with the Constitution and the criteria set out in Okiom Tata's case in order to be lawfully established. They did not comply. For the avoidance of doubt, the entire complement of 50 CISs is therefore unconstitutional. That is according to Justices Kanyi Kimondo and Alim Visram and Hedwig Ongunde. By the way, if you listen to that particular ruling for Hedwig Ongunde, it said, well, that position is justified, but on the basis of the criteria that was supposed to follow to make it constitutional, it did not meet that particular standard. And that's why our big conversation is on this morning. That's on page 7. Asking the question then, what next for President Dr. William Ruto? In essentially then, saying thank you to some of those ladies and gentlemen who helped him get into office. Good. Again, there's some story that has been covered on the Standard. Has also made appearance on the front page of The Nation this morning. Good, bad, and ugly of a 2022 health survey. Also read into that particular story on pages 7 as well. Actually, pages 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the Daily Nation. Good. Indeed, we've got to page 3. They're talking about the progress that 80% of Kenyan toddlers are now immunized. Again, looking forward to hitting them 100% by 2030. Good. Now, on the right top side of the Nation this morning, you're going to read about how the public sector wage bill hits new record as civil service pay rises and staff to get raise this July. Also, another headline that has grabbed the emotions of majority of Kenyans at a time when the cost of living keeps on shooting. The news that essentially grabbed headlines last week is that some members of the executive are essentially going to receive pay rises as from July. Good. Now, edible oil farms have also faulted the move to reduce tariffs on imports. Read that story on page 8 of the Daily Nation. That's exactly what it is that you're waking up to this morning in terms of your dailies. So you do know exactly what you're going to make once you go out to grab yourself a copy. Now, remember, majority of these stories, again, are being covered throughout our social media platforms at Lookuptv across all of them and on our website at www.lookuptv.co.ke. Once we come back, I'll be taking you shortly to our newsroom so you know what it is that you're waking up to this morning as well in terms or in as much as our newsroom is concerned. Good morning. Welcome back. Now, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Njuguna Ndung'u, has appeared before the County Public Investment and Special Funds Senate Committee to answer to questions regarding the state of pension remittance in the counties. According to the committee, many counties are yet to clear their debts, with just 3 counties fully remitting their payments.
According to a report submitted to the committee, the debt amount to be paid as quoted by the pension scheme stood at 85 billion shillings, proving a variance with 11 billion shillings that the counties claimed was still owed, which the Treasury CS attributed it interest and penalties applied.
Plus other issues that were raised about even the accumulation of those, if you look at the costs versus what is the arrears and where are we having these disparities, and Induprum doesn't seem to have come in. Even at the end of the day, maybe even to ask the question myself, why hasn't the RBA taken appropriate action given the way things are? We can be reporting these things, and of course, Mr. Chairman, I cannot prevent my friend Orikin asking very touching questions. Why is nobody seeing this as a problem? How come we are looking at these figures and we don't seem to see the problem?
And then, now this accumulation, Chair, is an accumulation because of basically in line with the rules of the scheme, and that if paid, then at least the scheme can actually revert back and compensate those members who have since left and even the existing members.
The Controller of the Budget, Margaret Nyakamo, who was also questioned by the committee, stated that her office had no authority to follow through with the payments to make sure they were paid, and therefore had no control of diversion of pension funds by the counties.
And there are 2 approvers at the county level. There's approver 1, there's approver 2. Now, approver 1 processes and uploads to the internet banking of the CBK. But the payment will not go through until approver 2 has clicked their role. Now, what has been happening? Diversion takes place when approver 2 decides not to pay the transactions that were originally planned. So they pick, because normally I'm also approver too for my office. So I can decide that I am not paying number 5, number 6, and that will mean that the cash in respect of that will be available. And now they then decommit. They like remove the transactions and upload different ones.
The committee has, however, called on the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, together with the Controller of Budgets, to liaise and come up with measures to help resolve the matter and put in place harsher penalties and laws regarding pension remittance, as many retirees are yet to enjoy their retirement benefits. Juliet Chepkoech, Lookuptv.
Azimio leader Raila Odinga has announced the return of nationwide demonstrations, calling on all Kenyans to take to the streets on the 7th of this month, where the country will be marking Saba Saba. Let's take a look at that story as well.
Speaking in Ugunja, Siaya County, Azimio leader Raila Odinga called on Kenyans to come out in large numbers and oppose what he calls punitive taxes by the Kenya Kwanza regime.
Wakenya wameamua kwamba sasa watashika mamlaka kwa mkono yao wenyewe. Na kwa hivyo wamesema di siku ya Saba Saba, tarehe 7 mwezi wa 7, Ijumaa ijao, Wakenya wote, Kenya mzima, watajitokeza na kusema kwamba enough is enough. Punda imechoka.
Odinga accused the RUTO-led government of imposing high taxes on the people of Kenya.
Wale mama mboga, watu wa bodaboda, watu wa jua kali, lakini sasa wamesahau watu wa jua kali. Wakenya walisema kwa kura ya maoni 59%, 95% ati hawataki gharama ya maisha ipandishwe, hawataki ushuru ipandishwe. Wakenya walikataa. Hawa jamaa wanataka kupandisha hali ya maisha na nguvu na kifua. Wakenya mpaka wakatai.
Leaders who accompanied Odinga decried the high cost of living, calling it a ban on the people of Kenya.
Wanaumia hapa. Walimu wanaumia. Polisi wanaumia. Wafanyikazi wa serikali wanaumia. Ili hali wanaongeza wajumbe na president nani mshahara. Na mimi nasema hivi kwa RUTO na tena mchana ya kwamba hali ya uchumi ya Kenya imeharibika. Hata mahakama kuu ikasema ya kwamba finance bill lazima izame.
RUTO, you said that you are going to reduce the cost of living. RUTO, now by increasing the price of fuel, you are through the back door increasing the burden of the Kenyan people on transport.
The Azimio leaders plan to hold what they call a mother of all demonstrations on Friday at Kamukunji in Nairobi.
On to our big story this morning. The High Court dismissed the appointment of 50 chief administrative secretaries, CISs, by President William Ruto as unconstitutional. This is following a petition by the Law Society of Kenya, LSK, and the Katiba Institute challenging the appointment process. Let's take a look at that story.
For the avoidance of doubt, the notification by the first respondent dated the 16th of March 2023, appointing the second to 51st interested parties to the office of Chief Administrative Secretary is hereby quashed.
After the Law Society of Kenya filed a petition in court against the appointment of the Chief Administrative Secretaries in a landmark ruling, the High Court, led by Justice Kanyi Kimondo, has termed the appointment of the 50 CS as unconstitutional.
At the current office of Chief Administrative Secretary, created by the first and fifth respondents and contained in the Kenya Gazette Special Issue number 12432, dated 12th of October 2022, and which announced the vacancies thereof, is unconstitutional. That the entire complement of 50 Chief Administrative Secretaries, which is to say all the second to the 51st interested parties is unconstitutional.
The three-judge bench in their ruling also questioned how public participation was conducted, insisting that it did not follow the principles of the same.
On the flip side, the sequence and procedure that led to the establishment of the 27 additional posts did not adhere to the constitutional principle under Articles 10 and 232 of the Constitution and conditions set under Section 27 of the PSC Act. This process, in our opinion, did not satisfy the guiding principles set out by the Supreme Court in the BAT case. We say so because, as a guiding principle, public participation must be real and cover all forms of governance.
Despite the CSS taking their oath of office early this year, Justice Kiage was skeptical as to why the number of their appointees was higher than that of the cabinet secretaries.
It is therefore our considered view that the creation of a similar office to the Assistant Minister, now in name of CASs, cannot be created in the manner the first respondent and the fifth respondent proceeded. Based on the reasoning set out above, we do not think that it was the intention of the framers of the Constitution to have 50 CASs deputizing 22 cabinet secretaries. Furthermore, public participation on the office of CAS was founded on a complement of 23 CASs.
In her ruling, Lady Justice Hedwig Agende faulted the Public Service Commission over failure to consult with the SRC on remuneration of the state officers.
It is therefore clear to us that the fifth respondent should have consulted the SRC in order for it to ascertain the resultant financial implications. The fourth respondent therefore failed to exercise its exclusive constitutional mandate under Article 230(4)(a). Further, that the fourth respondent, in its letter dated 14th March 2023, had advised for a higher gross monthly salary to that of the PS with no justification, as is clear from the Kenya Gazette notice number 8792 of 2022.
With most of those appointed into these positions being close allies of President William Ruto, the judges ruled that despite the president enjoying powers to appoint officers into whatever office, he ought to follow the law. However, the question remains, have the CSS been receiving remuneration? And what next for President Ruto after the ruling?
All right, now the question then is, I should have said, yeah, that's our news bulletin this morning. Thank you very much. Good. And that essentially then ushers into the next part of our conversation this morning, which is essentially making sense of President Ruto's tenure. It's not been 1 year, it has been barely a year into his time in office. So the question then being, if indeed majority of Kenyans would look at former President Uhuru Kenyatta and say that he's a man who didn't essentially listen to the court. In fact, some of us called him the most head-hardy president that the country has ever seen. A lot of court orders were essentially disrespected or disregarded, to the point that some people called him a man who could do anything. In fact, the biggest culmination of that was the spat that the former Chief Justice Maraga had with President Uhuru Kenyatta just before the former Chief Justice retired. We open a new chapter for President William Ruto, and the same cases that used to befall Uhuru Kenyatta have started again going the same direction. Guess what? That's exactly what we talk about this morning. As we ask the question, what essentially then is the way forward for President Ruto? Once we come back, you can already see I've got a panel that is already seated. For the sake of time, I'll introduce them once we come back properly. Then after that, we get to that discussion. Good morning. I'll see you shortly.
Infinity Industrial Park is one of the largest private industrial parks located along Eastern Bypass, Nairobi, which provides modern infrastructure for smooth operations for industries and business enterprises. Infinity Industrial Park offers world-class amenities and facilities with wide roads, a police station, a power substation, fire station, public transport stage, hospital, and shopping mall. In addition, Infinity Industrial Park also offers CCTV cameras, 24-hour private armed security patrol, sewer, water, fiber optic cable, and 3-phase power connection, added to public utility, canteen, and dining areas. Sail on the golden opportunity to invest in Infinity Industrial Park, fully serviced warehouses at a special price of 3,569 Kenyan shillings per square foot. For more inquiries, visit our website infinityindustrialpark.com.
KM Lookup Media, the holding company for Muthingi and Lookuptv, proudly presents the Mount Kenya Region Roadshow. It's time to mark your calendars because from the 4th to the 8th of July, we are bringing the excitement to Kiambu, Murang'a, Kirinyaga, Embu, Meru, Laikipia, Nyeri, Nyandarua, and Nakuru counties. Are you ready to be a part of an electrifying TV roadshow? Join us as we embark on a thrilling journey through the magnificent Mount Kenya region. Lookuptv and Muthingi TV are hitting the road. We are coming straight to your towns. But that's not all. We are not just bringing you TV. We are bringing you an unforgettable experience. Enjoy your favorite comedians like Njoro wa Ukulima ni Mali, Marafiki, among others, live performances, and get a chance to meet your favorite TV personalities right in your own town. To our sponsors and partners, book your slot for the greatest brand experience and conversions. To book this fast-moving opportunity, call 0110-430-158 or email sales@lookuptv.co.ke. Get ready to be swept off your feet as we bring the magic of television to your doorstep. Let the TV adventure begin.
On this particular episode, we are joined by one Alfred Mado.
I currently serve both the Old Mutual and the Absa Life. I consult for the True and I do business with them, and they have taken me as a lead consultant.
What is your definition of a successful business?
A successful business is a business that lives beyond time. If you're making 100,000 shillings, assuming that is the net income, that is after tax, 22% of that net income should go into savings and investment.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So the question this morning then is going to be, what next? That's it. It's a question that everybody is asking. And just before we came on air, I've really picked the sentiments of the panel that we have here today that I'm going to introduce now, take us through the next part of our conversation on this particular question. If indeed these particular positions were for awarding all the ladies and gentlemen who helped President Ruto go into office, that is the basis of it. If you do remember what President Uhuru Kenyatta did, then what next for these 50 now who have nothing to hang on in President Ruto's government? This morning, all right, I'm joined by Daniel OROGO, who's a political commentator. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Yeah, this morning.
Yeah, it's a good thing. You beat the traffic along Gatanga this morning. Yeah?
And the cold weather as well.
And the cold weather, isn't it?
Nairobi in July is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to have you around. Yeah. All right, for the sake of the conversation, I also want to introduce Danton KITUMBINI, who's a governance expert. Danton, how are you doing? All right. Happy to have you around, isn't it? And then finally, we do have Betty ADERA with us this morning. How are you doing, Betty?
I'm good. Glad to be here. It's been a while since I was here.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
All right. And Betty, I did introduce you last for this specific reason. We were talking, you were a bit silent, and I'm going to open you up to this conversation. Let's begin from where it is, Betty. Majority of Kenyans would know that it has been not a year for President Ruto in office. The promise for President Ruto was quite clear. I am going to fix it. Every other person who speaks around President William Ruto is like, those guys did it wrong. We are going to fix it. From expenditure, from borrowing, from governance, from every other thing that's going to happen in this government, Betty. We were treated to 50 CASs in office. We're going to look at exactly what every CAS was going to take home, even including the new review by SRC in essentially how much they were going to earn. Let me begin from there. Maybe this didn't come out clear. In his right mind, why would President William Ruto present 50 chief administrative secretaries to Kenyans, turn around and tell them, we do not have money, we're going to spend thin, we're not going to borrow, we're not even going to borrow to pay salaries? Let's begin from there.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor, yet again, to be here on Lookuptv. So here is the issue. President Ruto is less than a year in power. That's a fact.
It's a fact.
The Kenya Kwanza government is less than a year in office. That's another fact. The mandate that majority of Kenyans gave them was for 5 years. We are barely into a year, all right? So that's a fact. Secondly, may it be known to all of us that when there is a transition government, the previous administration term ended, there was a new one that's starting its fresh 5-year term, all right? And when such a transition happens, even historically in Kenya, there are bound to be teething challenges. There's bound to be need to pause, go back and just say, hey, this is what we promised. This is what we want to do differently in campaign, but this is now the reality now that we sit in office. So that also must not be lost on Kenyans. Now, specific to the issue of the 50 CASs. Remember, before we promulgated the current constitution, the constitution of Kenya before that made provisions for ministers. They were called ministers, if I recall. Mm-hmm. They were also called assistant ministers.
Yes.
Right? And the administration at that time, in their wisdom informed by the Kenyan context at that time, made the administration determine, you know, the number of ministers, who they were. Mainly they were from parliament. You had to have been an elected MP somewhere, right?
Yes.
To be a minister, to be assistant minister. And there were some ministries that had one assistant minister. There were some, you know, that had 2 or 3, right? And into the last term of the then late President Moi, there was an outcry still that how come there are so many assistant ministers at that time. There was that outcry. So my issue is that, going back to history, this situation of CS, first of all, is not new. Let's take it from there. Just the immediate former administration introduced the position of CS.
Unconstitutionally.
The president has powers, really.
Guided by the rule of the law.
Guided by the rule of law.
Which is the constitution, basically.
Yes, yes, yes. We don't disagree to that.
Yes.
And the president, be it the current sitting president, didn't just wake up and say, so Kenyans, here's the list. There was a process by the Public Service Commission. True?
True.
There were advertisements. And a commission of public service on Kenya cannot advertise something that is illegal. That process went on. Kenyans submitted their applications, those who felt they met the threshold. Shortlisting was done. All the names were published publicly. Interviews were done. At some point, the process also stalled because there was a court process that was questioning the public participation bit of it, right? Then it paused. Then they fixed that. And then they came back and the process continued. So President Ruto didn't just wake up from nowhere and said, okay, CSS ndio hawa, all right? Now, the issue, in my view, according to this ruling, now the ruling that came yesterday, is an issue between 23 and 27. The number 23 and 27. And basically, if I read it, my read of it is that there are issues to do with the number 50. Why 50? Why not 23? All right?
Yes.
And to me, when I look at the current executive right now, yes, cost of living is high for everybody, everywhere, not just Kenya. And that is a matter that is actually being looked into. All right? But we are also asking the same government for efficiency, right, in service delivery. We are also asking the same government for timeliness in service delivery. And it takes human beings to do these kinds of work. So when the president comes to Kenyans and say, hey, let me add pair of hands to the current CSS, to just help in service delivery and in ensuring that the quality of service is actually given to Kenyans, and the mandate that they were given by the people does not lag behind. What is the problem? If 23, hold on, if 23 is not an issue, then why can't he be allowed to move forward with the 23? As the remaining 27 is being looked into. If it was a issue of public participation, you know, that's not a problem. People can always go back and engage the thoughts of Kenyans, and based on what the findings are, move forward. But one thing that I can say is that, one, this is an administration that abides by the rule of law.
But it has
wait.
Yes. Betty.
Wait. Look.
Yes.
The court stopped the CASs.
Yes.
Did President Ruto tell them, ingeni kwa maofisi? No.
No,
it paused.
It didn't do that.
What?
It didn't do that. But even before the appointments, Betty, what was the biggest question? Even before we saw the 50 of them go to State House for appointment, President Ruto was quite aware that indeed there's a question lingering around the appointment of CSs in this country. It wasn't even about the number by then. Yes, Kenyans went out on an outcry and said, well, we need 50 CSs. But the question was on the legality of the CSs who are going to our office. You will like to think, Dan, let me pick your sentiments as well. Betty, I'm going to come back to you because there are also other issues that have arose from this appointment of CSs. Dan, the question on the legality. I listened to Betty and I'm saying, well, she's cognizant of the fact that there's a government that has not been in place for more than a year. By the way, counting, you will even count only 7 months in an office. Then, this particular one, does it point out to the pressure that essentially President Ruto fell to, knowing very well, and Betty, you do know that as well, that the names that they submitted were 23, and that was in the public domain. The PSC only got 23 names, but the names that essentially came from the PSC were 50. Who is this? Who then said, all right, President, you have 50 names in the CAS's list.
Well, good morning, Simba.
Good morning.
I mean, quite interesting that the things you really can't argue about. One is the figures. A second one is the rule of law. Quite difficult. You really cannot push through and argue about you know, have a contrary, sometimes contrary opinion.
Yes.
Let me be fair, because sometimes I always say when I sit in the panel, I try to be fair as much as possible. The current regime are inheriting the blatant violation of the law from the predecessors.
And they kept on saying that?
And they kept on saying that.
Yes.
Even on the campaigns. I mean, everyone faulted the previous regime for the violation of the Constitution. In 2018, there are a number of blatant violations that were done with the former regime, specifically on this issue, specifically on the appointment of CAS.
That's it.
Uhuru's regime equally inherited a blatant violation of a constitution in the previous regime. The regional commissioners are unconstitutional. Are they in the constitution? We are having them, yes. eight of them. So it is a parallels of drawing from a regime that inheriting a blatant violation from the predecessors. Even the next regime will inherit from this regime the precedences that we are causing. Yes. This is a matter of precedences. Coming back to this issue. Now, I have had Betty talking about, you know, that the issue is about the 23 or the additional 27. But look, all of us were glued yesterday, hearing clearly and seeing the ruling of the 3-judge bench. And one of their rulings was that these 50 CAS are strangers to the Constitution. It's not a matter of numbers. It's a matter of whether the Constitution provisions allow that we have 50 CAS. And why did the judge bench rule that? We will go back to this again.
Yes.
And they say this very well, that there is an attempt to expand the cabinet. That is not constitutional. There are clearly provisions that are provided for in the expansion of the number of cabinet secretaries, in the number of you know, the minimum and the maximum numbers of the cabinet secretaries and the principal secretaries. It is provided for in the Constitution. Any introduction, any co-opting that is not constitutional, you are staring to a legal landmine ahead of you. And offset, we were discussing this, that if there is a procedure that civil servants or public servants or anyone is co-opted in the cabinet, it is very well stipulated in the Constitution, the procedure, which including the interviews, you know, all these vetting, and it goes to the Parliament through the committees, and the committees table a report that is approved and then sent to appointment by the head of state.
Yes.
But you saw what happened with regards to the cases of 50 CS, when the speaker made a statement that looks that his hands were tied, and it is within the discretion of the head of state to appoint the 50 CAS, clearly shows you that there was a legal landmine. That was when the straw that broke the camel's neck concerning the appointment of these.
Pretty much, and you would have liked to think then that
and
the president would have read into the speaker's statement, isn't it?
Yes. That was it.
Yes.
Because that is what I saw. Clearly from there, I knew this case is watertight. This case is, you know, the CAS are not proceeding anywhere, because that was a loophole that was clearly there. But allow me also to say this. It is also a matter of judiciary regaining back, their foothold with regards to being the custodian of the Constitution. These are vivid images that we saw.
Yes.
In the ruling of the Building Bridges Initiative. The same punch that was coming from the High Court, the same punch that proceeded to the Court of Appeal, and the final blow that was in the Supreme Court. if there is any government advisor advising this government, is to be very careful of the decisions they are making that are legal. I mean, we are saying offset. This one is gone. Maybe the president, maybe the government might have a clear comeback politically, but not legally.
But not legally.
This case is closed.
Good. But I'm going to come back to you because it's raising issues that have essentially come out that indeed everybody did know. That if you listen to the sentiments of the speaker when this particular motion was brought up in the National House, the speaker said, when I'm tied, it's up to the president to make that decision whether indeed he is going to appoint the CASs or not. That's all. Let me also introduce you to this subject. The only thing that we didn't see happen in the previous government, by the way, even as the judges towards the end of President Uhuru Kenyatta's time, was that indeed he just woke up and appointed CASs without following the due process in the and that one was on only one pillar. There was no public participation, completely ignored that particular area, and then the court ruled that the CAS position was unconstitutional on that basis. What we did see this time around is that President Ruto came in office and you did see there was public participation that was anchored on the appointment of the 50 CASs. Good. But then they closed their eyes on one area as well. The involvement of Parliament, which is essentially what the Constitution also says. You will have liked to think for a man who wanted to fix the legality of this particular position, he would have thought it in wholesome. He did not. And he was told.
Okay, thank you so much. Questions that many Kenyans should be asking themselves right now is as to whether the question is whether the point of having 50 CASs is inherently unconstitutional, or is it in the in line with the structure or constitutionality, the spirit of the Constitution?
Yes.
If we talk about the spirit of the Constitution gives powers to the president to create an office and appoint into office as advised by the Public Service Commission. The president has that power. So if we talk about the spirit of the Constitution, the president actually has that power. If we talk about being inherently constitutional, I'll take you back to the former president when he introduced the CASs back in 2018. The High Court ruled that it was indeed unconstitutional. Then an appeal was made, and the same court, in the Court of Appeal, ruled that this was constitutional. The same court that we want to rely on right now ruled differently on the same matter a few years ago. We came back again in 2022, now recently, the president made the same, we can call it a mistake. And then in February this year, the Labor Relations Court ruled that this was constitutional, and it allowed the Public Service Commission to carry out to carry on with the interviews.
Yes.
It was in the public domain. The courts allowed it. The judiciary allowed it.
On the basis of what? You know, the courts would only... The basis would... On the basis of what? It's on the basis of what?
On the basis that the Public Service Commission followed the labor rules of the Constitution in establishing the office.
Pretty much. But if
so
you look,
what I can ask...
Just to clarify as you continue, if you look at the way the courts deal with petitions, petitions seek clear clarifications on one thing.
Yes.
If you feel today you want to challenge the appointment of CASs, you can't go in and challenge your entirety. The courts would ask you on what basis. And you're the one saying that the president has power to, that is clear. Within the Constitution.
Yes.
So the courts will rule the constitutionality of one specific petition.
So what I'm asking myself is, if the same court in 2018 through the Court of Appeal ruled that it was constitutional, in 2023 the same court ruled through the labor court that it was in line with the Constitution. Why then yesterday the High Court then will come back to rule again against the Court of Appeal in 2018 against the initial 23 CASs.
Yes.
And then again against the 27 CASs that were ruled in favor of by the labor courts. Are we having a judiciary that does not clearly understand the Constitution, or are we having a judiciary that is in excess of its own powers that are not checked for?
Yes. So just to be clear on that, by the way, I'm going to pull, and we do have right here, I'm going to pull that ruling that they made in 2018 and the one they've made right now.
Yeah.
It's essentially a reference to that. But what the courts essentially said, it's constitution. You can get in an office, you can go right ahead and do interviews. But then when you follow that rule to the latter, when it gets to parliament, and then the member, the chairman of National House Business, who in this case is Moses Wetangula, said, I'm tied on this particular issue, you throw it back to the courts as well on that particular area. Essentially, if you look at what Judge Hedwing essentially said, that there's justification, Betty, I'm coming to you now, that there's justification for this position is there. They are not calling it unconstitutional. They're just urging whoever wants to create it, follow the law to the latter, which is essentially what ruling they made yesterday. They said, well, if you look at what the Constitution says, whatever it's trying to respond to, 50 CAS, it's not in the spirit of the Constitution to have 50 CASs. Where you, in one ministry, you have even 5 CASs in one office. It's not in the spirit of the Constitution. But this Constitution is justified. Betty, are you failing to look at the president today in the morning in the face and say, you failed on that particular basis? Because this case is not new, Betty. The only thing you have to do is call your advisors, tell them, how do I make it legal?
I'd look at the president in his face now, this morning, and tell him 2 things. One is that you followed due process. I was very keen on the public service advertisement of CASs in the first place.
Which is legal?
Wait.
Which is legal, Betty?
You called me to speak, so give me time to speak.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which is legal, all right? So I'll look at him in the face and tell him, hey, dude, you followed due process. And the advertisement, if you even compare the advertisement for Public Service Commission for CAS and PS clearly said that for those whose names will be recommended to the head of state, they will be subject to further scrutiny at the National Assembly.
Yes.
That clause was there on Daily Nation, public. In the CAS, that clause was not there. So I don't know where the expectation of CASs to be vetted by Parliament in the first place came from. And probably the wisdom of the Speaker of the National Assembly to say, hey, this is not within my jurisdiction. Remember, he's also a lawyer by profession.
That's it.
He must have looked at where this journey started. And if it was not an expectation in the step number 1 in the first place, where was he going to come in to cause the National Assembly to vet these people? Now, look. So here's the thing. We are hell-bent, majority of Kenyans, to make the government look bad and to wish that it fails. It's not going to fail. The leadership is in place. The leadership is in the process of figuring it out. And the same court, judiciary is judiciary. It is one body. It's not 10. It is one body with various layers. And the same judiciary contradicts itself. So you won't tell me that the same court, was it Labour Court or which court,
yes,
that gave public service the green light to proceed with recruitment through a competitive process, recruitment of the CASs. That time it was right, but this time it is wrong. Court is court, judiciary is judiciary. So for me, I would rather the judiciary goes back to the drawing board, goes back wajiite nyuma ya tent. And as you're making ruling on this case, make reference to previous similar ones that were done by magistrates just like you, by judges just like you, under the same umbrella of the judiciary. If CASs was so bad, be it 1 or 50 or 100, then Public Service Commission should never have been allowed in the first place to proceed with that process. All right? Now, we are getting into 1 year into office of this new administration. Let's give the president and his team time to serve us, to fulfill their promises that they made to us, that they would do in 5 years, not in 5 months. All right? Now, lastly, and going back to what my fellow panelists said, there's the legal angle to this situation. But there's also the political angle to this situation. And I still go back to the public service advertisement. They clearly stipulated the role of CSs. If you want to apply for a CS, this is what you're getting into. One of the roles that was very key was to be a bridge between the executive and parliament. That was clearly written there. So if you look at the individuals, men and women whose names were proposed, there are people, majority of them with that political clout, to make that particular bridge happen. Now, our CASs need help. Everybody, wherever they're working, they need extra pair of hands. For me, the question would be, can we sustain it? And how do we move forward? But in terms of the promise also of providing quality service, efficient service to Kenyans, that was a promise also. You don't expect the president to be everywhere. He needs to have adequate pair of hands to get the job done.
Pretty much. Dan, I'm going to come back because now it's now starting out clear. We do have the cases on those rulings in 2018 and whatever it is I'm referencing to yesterday. I'm going to read it to you in full so we can see exactly who didn't listen to the courts. And there's somebody who was asking here the question. Betty says the majority of Kenyans really do feel like the government, do feel like this government will not fail. I do have a Moses Combo. Thank you very much for watching this morning. You're asking, why is it? Who's this majority? Once we come back.
KM Lookup Media, the holding company for Muthingi and Lookuptv, proudly presents the Mount Kenya Region Roadshow. It's time to mark your calendars because from the 4th to the 8th of July, we are bringing the excitement to Kiambu, Murang'a, Kirinyaga, Embu, Meru, Laikipia, Nyeri, Nyandarua, and Nakuru counties. Are you ready to be a part of an electrifying TV roadshow? Join us as we embark on a thrilling journey through the magnificent Mount Kenya region. Lookuptv and Muthingi TV are hitting the road. We are coming straight to your towns. But that's not all. We are not just bringing you TV. We are bringing you an unforgettable experience. Enjoy your favorite comedians like Njoro wa Ukulima ni Mali, Marafiki, among others, live performances, and get a chance to meet your favorite TV personalities right in your own town. To our sponsors and partners, book your slot for the greatest brand experience and conversions. To book this fast-moving opportunity, call 0110-430-158 or email sales@lookuptv.co.ke. Get ready to be swept off your feet as we bring the magic of television to your doorstep. Let the TV adventure begin.
All right, let's then keep on looking into this particular issue. Before then, we ask the question, what next for President William Ruto? Good. Dan, let's look at what those judges say, that it is not in their spirit of the Constitution to have 50 CASs. That's exactly what they said, that good, you can justify this position, just like Judge Edwin said. Well, yeah, you can justify this position. It is justified. The executive can come up with that position. But then it's not in the spirit of the Constitution to have 50 chief administrative secretaries. Is that what was also at pain for the president to explain to majority of Kenyans who oppose that move?
And regardless of any way, I still have a problem with the interpretation of that decision.
Yes.
Because mine is just white and black.
Yes.
That any position that is provided for an executive appointment is a position that is clearly stipulated. The processes are well stipulated and articulated in the Constitution.
Yes.
I think in his ruling, I think that should be Justice Kimondo saying that, you know, it was probably not in the mind of the constitutional framers that we have 50 CAS that are assisting how many cabinet secretaries? 22?
22.
You see, which clearly says, you know, this for him,
yes,
I mean, it's quite difficult to comprehend that fact. That's what I keep on saying, that look, we are here arguing about whether the president and his executive order can invoke an appointment that contradicts the Constitution, and then we sit and justify that action. It has taken a toll, and you can see clearly that it has been that way, and the precedents and the consequences are there and they're here with us. Including the recount that my colleague, Danton is just giving. The pains that are within the interpretation of law and the blunders that have been done by successive regimes.
Yes.
It is clear that is where we are. And you know, we are trying to explain where the problem could be. You know, trying to get whether it's lack of interpretation from the appeals court or from the Industrial Labor Relations Court. But for me, wherever you are trying to trace it, it's quite simple. That you cannot make an appointment that contradicts and breaches the Constitution and go away with it. It is just impossible.
Yes.
Secondly, I agree with some of Betty's assertion here. That you see that people who are hell-bent in making sure that the government of the day, you know, looks like it's not delivering, that is unpopular with the people, you know, and that the regime is not really, sensitive to matters that are affecting the public.
Yes.
But also tell Betty that, you see, the regime is working so hard also to be unpopular with the people. You understand? Hell-bent on making decisions that contradicts the will of the people. And this is just but one of the rulings. There are another ones that are pending. There are issues of the finance bill, and Okia is in court.
Doesn't.
Right? And that IPRA has gone ahead to make a decision in that is the background of a court making a decision as well.
Doesn't.
That is also another one. We are equally staring to a number of court cases. You know, other people, another one has gone to court questioning different aspects of a decision that were made by the government.
Yes.
So as much as we are here, you know, and I agree to some extent that, you know, we try so much hard to make sure that the government, and it's political at the end of the day,
yes,
but the government itself by serious blunders, making, you know, legal landmines that surely foresee that this is becoming unpopular. So for me, I still maintain that these positions, whatever how much we try to justify.
Yes.
And Betty is saying that he would tell, you know, President William Ruto,
yes,
you know, that he was right in following those procedures. And sometimes I also see, is it really a right decision, really, for us to massage, decisions that are made in contradiction of the court?
Yes.
And still say that you made a right decision to help the government make serious blunder? That is not right. That is not right, Simba.
Danton, let me bring you in on this, but I'm going to read for you the exact ruling by Anthony Mrima. Yes. Please. Yes. Yeah.
You see, this whole aspect of government being popular or not, I would like to bring to light what were the intentions of the president, first off, to bring the 50 CASs.
What was it, Danton?
You see, in the former constitution, we had the constitution gave the president powers to appoint whatever numbers of ministers and assistant ministers as he so wishes. The new constitution gave a limit, 14 to 22, to appoint ministers, now called cabinet secretaries, with a limit, but not deputized. But the ministries will have principal secretaries to assist in running of the ministry process. Upon establishment of this CS office in 2018, the court had an argument in the premise that there was overlapping of what will be the PS doing if we have a CS.
Yes.
Helping in running of the same seats.
Danton, I want them to come fix your mind. Your mic. Somebody tells me that we've lost you momentarily. All right.
Listen,
yes.
As
Just
Betty comes in.
Pretty much.
No, as Betty comes in.
I
just remembered.
Yes.
There are strangers.
Yes.
That took an oath of secrecy in State House.
That's it. I'm going to come.
That is also part of what is in court.
I'm going to come back.
That is constitutional or not.
Yes. I'm going to come back. We're going to come back to that, Dan. By the way, you're going to respond to that. Betty, there's something that Dan essentially said. Betty, the hustler government narrative, the unpopularity of a government, and that's exactly what Danton is essentially trying to respond to on that. Let me just read for you that particular one, and Danton, I want you to listen to it as well, because you're coming to respond to it. Now, this is what High Court Judge Anthony Murima essentially ruled on the creation of chief administrative secretaries, all right, in Uhuru Kenyatta's government. And I read, this is it. He said that the cabinet secretaries will continue to serve without being vetted. If you remember, they were never vetted, were unconstitutional, and were in office illegally. Continue to say that any permanent secretary not competitively recruited by the PSC is in office illegally. Something that we saw, that were not essentially competitively recruited by the PSC, they were essentially picked. And then what we're saying here is that there was no public participation in the decision to introduce CASs as assistants to cabinet secretaries. Danton, you see, it's quite clear. That's what they're saying. That, number one, they were not competitively recruited by the PSC. They were not vetted. That ruling was quite clear that indeed you had to vet them, if indeed you're going to make them constitutional. Which therefore makes me ask you this question, Betty. If this was quite clear, who vets CASs according to that ruling? It is Parliament. But Parliament comes and tells you, we can do that because we are tied by the Constitution. Shouldn't the big question, Betty, for this administration been, what do we do so that now we can have them vetted? Shouldn't have it started from there? Because they did everything around this ruling, save for one, the vetting. Shouldn't have it started from there, Betty?
Thank you very much. I tend to believe that from that ruling in Uhuru's government tenure in office, right, to what we have now, there is considerable progress that this administration has ensured was put in place. Then PSS were picked. This one, PSS went through a process. True? Then CASs were picked. This time, PSS went through a process. All right? And I wish you could also pull up the ruling that made Public Service Commission proceed, that gave them the green light in this, and
it's actually here. I'm going to pull it up.
Right? And let's look at the grounds for which the process was stalled, what PSC did that made the ruling to come, that now PSC, you have, the green light. Now, it is one thing to want something, it's quite another to actually do it. PSC did not indicate in their advertisement, which is public, that CASs would be required, and I wish you could also pull that advertisement as well, would be required to go through a vetting process in the National Assembly.
Betty, that's not their responsibility. Betty.
Wait. If it is not their responsibility.
It's not their responsibility.
No. I'm talking about the advertisement. I'm not saying the actual vetting. Actual vetting happens in National Assembly. I'm talking about public service mandate.
It's
how come then
it's a simple mandate. We're going to interview you. Done. Then forward you to the relevant body.
Okay.
There.
How come
Yes.
then the advertisement for PS,
yes,
permanent secretary, principal secretaries,
yes,
had that clause?
It is the
by the same Public Service Commission.
The president.
So
has,
my
yes.
point is
yes.
that for me, I would rather we look at what can we learn out of this,
yes,
and way forward. But bottom line, was there any law that was that somebody went against? No.
That's what we hear, Betty.
Yes.
That's what we hear, Betty.
Which law?
That's what we hear, Betty.
Which law?
The Kenyan Constitution.
Public Service Commission went through. Public Service Commission
Yes.
went through a process.
Which is all right.
Which is all right.
Which is right. Constitutional.
What is wrong with that?
Yeah. No.
What's illegal about that?
No. Nothing is wrong.
Illegal.
Who are these
illegal about that?
CAs? That's what I need to understand.
What is illegal?
Betty, nothing is illegal with
now,
that.
we've already had
Yes.
that the president, in his wisdom and powers given by the same constitution we're talking about,
yes,
can appoint people.
Fine.
Can appoint people.
Saying yes.
And what he did, probably, was then to follow the procedure. Instead of waking up and just saying the following, he caused a process to happen. He let Public Service Commission do its job of competitively advising him on who the commission felt was suitable.
Which is legal. We're not saying anything to that, Betty. The question here that we're asking, and Danton, I want you to jump in, Dan, before you also jump in.
When he comes in, I also want him to clarify. Who are these CAS in the Constitution?
That in the Constitution.
That is the only why I really need to understand. Who are they? Where are they mentioned?
Just a tiny recap. And that's why I kept on saying that when the court responds to a particular case, they only respond to a petition. A petition seeks clarification from the court. They will never clarify an issue that has not presented in front of them. It's the interpretation of the law, isn't it? The petition that essentially found the illegality of Uhuru Kenyatta CSs in office was quite specific. They've not been vetted. They've not been, there was no public participation, and they were not competitively, all right, appointed by PSC. They were quite clear. They were quite clear. So why are we looking at that ruling and saying that the court is contradicting itself, Danton, when the court is quite clear on the legality of this issue?
Okay, I would like to take you back to somewhere you said we didn't have the part of the petition did not question on the public participation.
Yes.
You are actually wrong on that. The first ruling that came out was as to, one of the questions that the court asked was as to whether public participation took place.
Yes.
And in submission, the PSC said that public participation took place.
Was that on the ruling of Uhuru Kenyatta CSS or this one?
No, the current one.
Yeah, the current one, yeah.
In submission, the PSC said we received over 400 responses from the public.
That's it.
And only 180 of the responses did not, were not in concurrence with the position of the CAS.
That's it.
Okay. Or another question.
And then 200, there was another 200.
Yes.
No, essentially, the submissions were slightly in the region of 400, and only 180 were not in concurrence.
That's it.
Okay. So public participation took place.
Danton, I didn't say public participation did take place. I'm saying they yes. I clearly said essentially what they did go through some of them. Public participation took place. It took place, and it was advertised, by the way.
I also want to point out something that the court said yesterday.
Yes.
I think it was Lady Justice Idubi or something.
Yes.
She was saying that the economy, the executive did not have the budget or the fund, did not have enough fund to finance the CAS. First off, that was it was totally out of jurisdiction for the judiciary to say that the executive lacked capacity to finance the CAS, which is something we also pointed out, whether it is the right economic time to have such a position. Looking at it in figures, paying out these CASs in one economic year is only 439 million. Throughout the 5 years, it's slightly 2.1 billion, which is something we can afford. It will not hurt the economy. Yes, that's very cheap. When you're talking about 3.65 trillion, of budget.
Do you think majority of Kenyans are going to agree with you this morning when you say that this is exactly what we can afford on the back of the rising taxes to fund the salaries of these officials?
To answer that,
yes.
I would say what Kenyans should be asking themselves
yes.
is, what were the intentions of the president?
Yes.
What did he have in mind, first off, to establish these offices? The obvious point would be it was to reward the loyal people he had with during the campaign. But essentially another point...
What position would that rank in terms of awarding those people that essentially campaigned
that
with
is
him?
very important.
That's very important.
Would
you say it's number one?
No, it's not number one.
Yes.
It's not number one.
Would you
part
say
of the budget,
yes.
part of budgeting the whole of this running the CAS office,
yes.
By estimates, it would cost the taxpayer about 13 billion in 5 years, considering the whole office and staff and what have you. I wanted to ask you, how many people do you think would benefit in terms of employment, in terms of supply, in terms of any other benefits that would come from the office of the CAS?
Yes. Danton,
a single CAS
yes.
would be entitled to how many drivers that would get employment, how many bodyguards,
yes.
how many people in the office, how many single individuals would benefit from a single office alone of the CAS.
Paid by who, Danton?
Paid by the taxpayer.
Who's the taxpayer that we're talking about here this morning?
In return of what?
In return of what?
In return for efficiency of running state departments. The 50 CAS were to essentially streamline the running of individual state departments, not ministries,
yes.
as it was essentially in the previous government. They were deputizing state departments, including the they were called the chief minister, the Mudavadi's office. It was entitled to 2 or 3
yes.
CASs. Yes, so that was going to be very effective way of running every single ministry and every single state department.
Yes. Let me just, Betty, Dan, just before I bring you in as well, because there's a direct question here that you have to respond to as well. Questions are coming in. Dan, let's then look at what essentially PSC envisioned the functions of a chief administrative secretary were going to be. And Danton, I need you also to listen to them clearly this morning. For the failure of doubt, number one, responding to issues or questions touching on the portfolio of the assigned office. That's essentially telling us what this office does. Do you need 5 people to tell us what the Ministry of Defense essentially does in this country, or Interior? Hold on, I'm going to continue. Done. Providing liaison with the National Assembly and Senate at a time when the cabinet secretaries now, you do know very well, are answerable to the National Assembly, which was the biggest win for President
the
Ruto.
National Assembly.
All right,
yes.
Good. We're going to continue. So you see, we are nullifying them as we go by. Providing liaison with county governments on matters of current mandate. A position, a function you're going to find also sitting with the Senate as well. We do know that's exactly what they do. Good. Number 4, providing interministerial sectoral coordination, representing the cabinet secretaries as instructed by the CS. Okay, execute any other duties and responsibilities specifically to the assigned to the office by the cabinet secretary in furtherance of interest of the ministry. So any other thing that is left that you may wish a CAS can do, you can actually give it to them. Do you feel that these are positions that would require 5 CASs in one ministry? Just before I cross over to that.
I would like to take you back again.
Yes.
In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was very public. It was very clear the role the CAS in the Ministry of Health was very vital in helping out the CS carry out its mandate. You could imagine how chaotic it would be were it not for the assistance of the CAS then. I will take you to the Ministry of Interior and Coordination.
What specifically, let me just point out, what specifically did she do during that period that would have been worse off if we didn't find her in office, by the which they stopped?
Okay, at that time, the requirements of direct contact by the ministry, by the CS then, was so urgent that he could not deliver himself alone. In fact, it took assistance of other CASs to come in, including the Minister of Interior then, including the Director General, who is someone low in the rank in the ministry. You remember the acting AG of the ministry had to come in so that it would move.
Danton, are you aware that all the updates that you kept on receiving during that period, you're still receiving them now from the ministry?
Yes.
Are you aware?
Yes.
Do you agree that towards the end of those updates, when essentially the numbers kept on rising and rising, her role essentially kept on diminishing as days went by, to the point that we in the media stopped receiving those invitations, to the point that we were told, go to the website of the Ministry of Health and get proper clarifications on whatever it is that we've been doing here? They started sending PDFs.
That was a new thing. That was, the pandemic was something we had never experienced as a country.
Yes.
Okay? That is why as we proceeded, we learned how to streamline the processes and make it easier and concentrate on other aspects of the whole ministry and other government processes.
Do you feel in any way that that particular ministry now is not running up to speed now that the CIS is not there? Would you tell Kenyans this morning that, well, everything that is going wrong on in the Ministry of Health currently,
right now they can do that. We don't even have even have a budget right now. We have not even received the exchequer from the treasury. If that money comes out, we don't have efficiency in the ministry, the government will fail. That what is exactly what the Azimio wants. They want this government to fail. We will not have accountability.
Dan, could you jump in on that particular one?
No, I am not Azimio. I think your hand is pointing.
Declare this morning.
You can easily be mistaken for being in opposition, but just questioning the basic and logic structure about the governance in this country. Now, I think you see the struggle, the struggle to justify and explain some of these, decisions and policies are currently behaving the country. I like what you've asked. Does the ministry stop running because the court has quashed the positions of the cabinet secretaries? No. And in fact, if they have been receiving a salary, there should be another case for refunding Kenyans on the salaries that they have been receiving, and yet the constitution did not allow them to hold that office, if that is it, for the months that they have been there. If in case they are occupying an unconstitutional position and gaining money from the exchequer, from the public, that should be. That should be. I'm just saying in case. Secondly, this is what I keep saying, if, and you've asked an interesting question, what would be in the mind of the appointing authority? And allow me to say the appointing authority by not saying the president is one, probably in the context of right now, is the appointing authority. What could be in the mind? And he's answered very, very, very well, that the struggle to fill in this position, to reward, some of these personalities who have been either assistants to you in your campaign or in one way or the other, which for me, and that's why I said my analysis to this must always be fair, that each and every appointing authority subsequent to succeeding in the government would look back and actually try to get your, your support base, getting some positions. It is not a bad thing, because in one way or the other, you do that. In one or the other, and it's been in successive regimes. That probably could be happening if it's done in accordance, to the law, because once you are an appointing authority, you are subject to a law of the land. In this context is a constitution. And you see, I've asked my colleague Danton to tell me, and he's not answered me, in the portfolios that are provided in the constitution, where are the CAS in the constitution? He's not believed to tell me that. He's not in the constitution. When we take a constitution, in the context, because in the cabinet, just Simba, in the context of the cabinet composition, it's quite clear who composes the cabinet.
It's quite clear. The law is quite
clear about it. There is no way about, hulabaloo about who points, who fill in these. And that's why I said someone will go to court again and probably even question, do we have the position of the chief cabinet secretary in the constitution? Somebody might go ahead. As the questions are, who is it that took the oath of secrecy in the state house that is not in the cabinet?
Pretty much.
So these are simple, blunders that this government makes, and if you are questioned, you think the public is making you to look bad, but in essence, there's critical things you're not listening to. What the citizens are telling you. And second, as I conclude and leave it for Betty actually, because not taking her time.
Yes.
Sorry, her time for response.
Yes.
You see, you asked about, is it possible, is it feasible to have the chief administrative secretaries drawing from that huge budget? And the answer is that this is well manageable. Kenyans are struggling with the rising wage bill. Kenyans are struggling with the economy right now. And it's quite insensitive to anyone of us in this panel or in the government justifying that any position can be created drawing billions from the exchequer of money, if in essence we know very well that their functions in delivery would not meet the value for that money.
Yes.
In the 5 years to come. We cannot sit on the panel and justify that. And that's why I said, while we draw different views, and at the same time also like to question the opposition, because there's no alternative. We are here and saying, government does this, government does that, but where is the possible alternative? The opposition is not there as well. So I think it's important for critical voices who are not lambasted, whether you are in Azimio or Kenya Kwanza, to critically questioning the performance of this government.
Yes.
Because it's no longer sensitive to the public appeal of what the citizens are actually voted them to do. That is it.
Pretty much. Once we come back then from this tiny break, Betty, you're going to take on the next part of the conversation. If indeed, just like Danton is saying, that top of the reasons as why President William Ruto then would essentially have the CIS as an office is again to reward, and that's given, and the constitution is justified, to reward the fellow ladies and gentlemen helping get in the office. What next? Because political analysts and lawyers alike are now saying, for that position to come back, it has to be amended into the constitution, and that might take forever for us to realize. Once we come back right here on the morning brief, the question is going to be, what next then for the 50 who have nowhere in President Ruto's office now?
KM Lookup Media, the holding company for Muthingi and Lookuptv, proudly presents the Mount Kenya Region Roadshow. It's time to mark your calendars because from the 4th to the 8th of July, we are bringing the excitement to Kiambu, Murang'a, Kirinyaga, Embu, Meru, Laikipia, Nyeri, Nyandarua, and Nakuru counties. Are you ready to be a part of an electrifying TV roadshow? Join us as we embark on a thrilling journey through the magnificent Mount Kenya region. Lookuptv and Muthingi TV are hitting the road. We are coming straight to your towns. But that's not all. We are not just bringing you TV. We are bringing you an unforgettable experience. Enjoy your favorite comedians like Njoro wa Ukulima ni Mali, Marafiki, among others, live performances, and get a chance to meet your favorite TV personalities right in your own town. To our sponsors and partners, book your slot for the greatest brand experience and conversions. To book this fast-moving opportunity, call 0110-430-158 or email sales@lookuptv.co.ke. Get ready to be swept off your feet as we bring the magic of television to your doorstep. Let the TV adventure begin.
Infinity Industrial Park is one of the largest private industrial parks located along Eastern Bypass, Nairobi, which provides modern infrastructure for smooth operations for industries and business enterprises. Infinity Industrial Park offers world-class amenities and facilities with wide roads, a police station, a power substation, fire station, public transport stage, hospital, and shopping mall. In addition, Infinity Industrial Park also offers CCTV cameras, 24-hour private armed security patrol, sewer, water, fiber optic cable, and 3-phase power connection, added to public utility, canteen, and dining areas. Sail on the golden opportunity to invest in Infinity Industrial Park, fully serviced warehouses at a special price of 3,569 Kenyan shillings per square foot. For more inquiries, visit our website infinityindustrialpark.com.
Oof, all right. Trying to figure then what next for President William Ruto after what the Standard called a body stop. As I said, in fact, the exact words were a body blow, all right? Referring to the 50 that essentially would have seen majority of his side get into government. Good, Betty. Now let's then think about it like this. And I want you to start from the popularity of the Kenya Kwanza agenda. I mean, you've listened to Daniel essentially trying to go at Danton this morning on the fact that majority of Kenyans right now, they're cognizant of the fact that the cost of living is high. And if indeed you are going to speak true to that fact as a president, you have to feel that you're pulling in the same direction, which is why this particular headline would make sense to majority of Kenyans this morning in terms of the popularity of a government, of President Ruto saying that he's going to freeze pay rise for top state officials, especially after SRC announced it. And if you listen to what he said, well, I'm cognizant of the fact that in this country, we're in this problem together. So when it comes to some of the things that you push for in a government, it is to run thin, pointing to the popularity of your proposals. Good. In a line of the majority of people are going to receive salary increments, CASs were topping that list. The majority of them are going to earn more. In fact, CASs now are going to earn more than PSs in office. If indeed we're talking about the popularity of a government, the popularity of a government, according to Daniel's definition, is can you run the government according to the will of the people? Do you think majority of Kenyans now would want the president to again continue fighting for the reintroduction of CASs when he already has a government that has been running for 7 months? Number two, if indeed part of that reason, and heavily, like Danton is saying, is number one, you gotta be cognizant of the fact that you put them there to award them for sticking with him, campaigning with him to form a government, is to give them those positions. What next after the court has stopped them?
So thank you for those questions. And this is a very lively and strategic conversations on this studio today. I think just demonstrating that as a country, we've come of age, you know, in all our governance and so on, and even the voice of the people to voice issues. So voicing is actually good, and it is expected, and it is appreciated. Because then if you don't voice, you'll be wallowing, you know, somewhere, you know, crying, and then no one is listening to you. Mm-hmm. So voicing is actually appreciated, and I want to believe that probably that was the spirit of the emphasis of public participation angle in the Constitution itself, is so that Kenyans have a voice, have a stake, say that, okay, it passed, it didn't pass, but I participated, I made my voice to be known. Now, we are looking at a listening president. Mm-hmm. A listening president just 7 months in office, all right? Less than a year. A president who the salaries commission says, all right, it's time. According to the calendar of that commission, it's time, you know, to increase salaries for the following. The president says, no, pause. While we appreciate that, why don't we first of all see what we can add to the regular civil servants. Sinukweli. So that let's start from there. Let's start from there as we move up. Why do you think he did that? He did that because he too is cognizant of the fact that cost of living has gone up. And by the way, cost of living for real it is up. No one is doubting or denying that fact. But also appreciating that this cost of living that has gone up in the entire world. It's not only unique to Kenya. Go here in Tanzania. You hear how people are crying. They don't have no finance bill, no constitutional, no CS and everything. So for me, I'd rather we separate issues. We focus and look at, all right, what is it? How can we contribute suggestions on how the cost of living can be brought down? All right? My colleague is saying there's a chain of petitions coming. That is very much welcome. Again, it demonstrates, the expanded legal space. In Kenya, if you feel something is not happening right, there's a door you can knock and speak your voice, and it will be heard in whatever direction it takes.
Yes.
So that is number one. Number two, again, still on CASs. All right. This is a new administration. They still have options. All right? There are legal options. There also are political options. Legal options could be that was a high court. There's still a higher court higher than the high court. All right? That the matter can be escalated to. But of course, addressing the issues that have been flagged by the ruling that was made yesterday.
Yes.
All right? And if the 23 are okay, then the 23 can be allowed to move forward with the 23 as they argue, the rest. Again, it is one thing to promise service, it's another to ensure that that service is of quality. And quality, any service will not happen by itself. It has to be done by people. And these are Kenyans, they're not strangers from some other country. All right? Now, the other political direction also can be the same back to the same parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate, and bring these motions there and see how, it can be debated there. But I also want to say that while I'm not a lawyer by profession, I also have gone to school enough to know that the Constitution provides a framework upon which legislation happens, upon which decisions, policies, and so on are informed. All right? So you cannot expect every single title in the executive to be in the Constitution. All right? The same Constitution gives the president, whoever the president is, the powers to, in his wisdom, to decide who else he wants to appoint and which other title he wants to give them. So CAS, current regime, previous regime, is not that the president acts outside of his powers, but within the powers that are given to him, by the same constitution that we are talking about. All right? Now, moving forward, I want to believe that one, opportunities for dialogue must be open and they must continue. Let's have many of these kinds of conversations that we are having to hear diverse thoughts, diverse points of views, and determine how to move forward, as a country. That is one. Number two, public participation is critical. And now we are even in the era of digital, right? You don't have to meet physically to say you did public participation. It can be done in all manner of ways. Can we have more expanded spaces for public participation? And like I said, and you can take my word on this, that the president is a listening president. Lastly, I was in a show called Miss President, 2018, 2019.
Yes.
And part of what I learned there was that one of the roles, unwritten, it's not written anywhere, unwritten roles of any president of any country is to manage the politics of the country. Or else the country can go can go south, all right? Right now, we are in a situation of Sabasaba is knocking the door in a few days' time, all right? And the Kenyans are saying the cost of living is high. The president is not denying that fact. All he is saying is that, look, there are some things I as president need to do or cost to be done in the short term. There are also things that I need to do in the long term, in the medium term, and then in the long term. By the way, 5 years is medium term. That's not long term. But there are immediate things.
Yes.
So one thing he's even saying with the finance bill is, after going through due process, there was nothing illegal about that process. It was done according to the script. Take the conversation to National Assembly, let it be debated there, let people vote, blah, blah, blah. And now it is law. Although it has been like stopped by the same courts, we are also pausing and saying, let's wait and hear for that ruling. We see how that thing goes, and then we take it. We take it from there.
But you haven't. The government hasn't.
What
prize not.
Now listen.
Yes.
The day that the president ascended, signed it into law.
Yes.
All right? How long did it take before the court petition and the court ruling?
There was still many hours to midnight.
Yeah, but how long did it take?
Yeah, there was many hours to midnight.
No. At what point did the court ruling that stopped it come?
Yeah, it was around 3 p.m. on Saturday, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, so in the meantime, between that time is when sort of like, EPRA and several others, looked at the ruling, not ruling, the decision of ascending it into law, and then they did what? They acted within the law of that particular time. So now the question that we should be saying is that the court has stopped it. Sinukweli?
Does it?
The court has stopped it. So then should we go back and say, EPRA, should you also pause
Betty.
this thing that you did? And I can tell you conversations along that is actually happening.
How long
How
long does it take for you to follow a court order in this government, Betty?
But you see, the court order is coming after an implementation.
Which is okay.
Right?
Are you arrived to the fact that indeed there was almost 8 hours after the court made that ruling when EPRA essentially introduced it? They kicked in at 11:59 p.m. All right? They still had all this time to come back. In fact, in other days, EPRA has actually reviewed the prices at 11:59 p.m. So you wake up the next morning and then you have the 14th date when you have new prices. But they haven't.
I'm telling you, conversations around that is actually happening.
Do we need a conversation like this one right now?
Internal conversation is actually happening. Believe it when we say that.
Yes.
Is actually happening in relation to the court ruling.
Contravention of a court order, isn't it? Is that what you're saying, Betty?
You're not listening.
I am listening. You're saying conversation.
So here's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Here's what I'm saying.
Yes.
The bill was signed into law.
Does it?
By who? By the president himself, according to the law.
Good.
All right? EPRA processes to abide by that new law started.
And we do agree.
All right?
And we do agree.
So by the time this court order is happening, processes had already started.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Not according to EPRA. EPRA processes was supposed to start on the 1st. That was not fast.
Anyhow.
The court order came before fast, isn't it? To stop whatever it is the president had implemented. So every other, and that's what I'm saying, Betty, that the popularity of a country, even as you're saying, the popularity of a government is running the country according to the will of people. The will of the people here is do not, because that's why we had a petition in court. But now, here we are, a couple days later, Kenyans are still buying fuel at 195, 179, and 168. Is that the will of the people? And you're saying that he's listening. Why is he not listening to that?
So the will of the people is for the administration to do something, to do all it can, to do all in its power to bring the cost of living down. That is the current will of the people, everywhere you go. And I'm also telling you that the same will of the people is what the president and this administration is actually listening to. Let us give them time. Announcements will come not too long from now as we wait to hear what the court processes and decisions will actually eventually, come back to.
How many Kenyans would you make angry by telling them, well, your courts have ruled, what you wanted has essentially been accepted by the courts, which is a system introduced by the Kenyans themselves in their constitution. But then you tell them, you see the courts have ruled, you gotta wait. We're thinking about it.
Anger of Kenyans cannot be underscored, all right? People are going hungry. Cost of living is high.
Yes.
Nobody is denying that.
Yes.
Nobody is actually refusing that.
Yes.
All right? But what we are just simply saying is that give this administration time. Give this administration time. They are here for the long haul. They're here for the short term. They're here also for the medium term. Give it time.
Why? Just back to the. Dan, I'm going to come back to it. Just back to the position for CASs. Why hasn't the president just gone on and said, well, be in office? It's the same thing. Be in office, regardless of what the courts have said. Just stick in office. We're still speaking to the courts because the courts have made a decision on the position of CS. As we woke up this morning, we do not expect them to be in office. Why can't the president then say, be in office?
In the first place, they were never in office, even. They've never been in office.
That's it. But it was
They've never been in office.
It was waiting for the decision of the courts, isn't it?
They're waiting for the decision of the
That's it.
courts.
So why can he turn around and say, well, be in office,
That's
we're
why
going
I'm
to speak
saying
to the courts?
conversations on that are
But it's not different. It's not different. But it's not different. There's no conversation. It's not
really. He's saying. I really understand.
Yes. Dan, from what point do you understand that these are two particular different issues are not different?
No, that's what I'm saying.
No, they are totally. I would like to come in for bed on that.
Dan, I'm going to come back to. Yes, Danton.
I would like to come in for bed. You see, you are downplaying the importance of the finance bill.
Yes.
As much as we might have veered off the topic of discussion,
yes,
I would like to point out that the Finance Act is constitutional. It is provided for in the Constitution that by April of the financial year,
yes,
there has to be an Act of Parliament of Finance submitted to Parliament to essentially provide for the source of financing the budget.
We do agree.
Without the Act, we cannot finance a budget. We cannot run a country.
That's okay.
But without CS in office, the country will move forward. The oil prices or the petroleum prices are just a single clause of the finance bill. There are so many clauses in the finance bill that if we stay, the country will stall. The country will not move.
Yes.
Is that what you want? That's what the opposition want. But as the executive, they cannot allow the country to stall because of one clause that mandated whoever this is Umtata and four others.
Danton, we're not talking about the executive here, we're talking about the courts in the country. The courts are not Azimio. So whatever decision they're making is advised.
Yes.
All these rulings they're making, they're well advised. It's not a blanket. They're not closing the country, are they?
I agree with
you. How
you.
do you interpret a court's decision? It's an advised decision, isn't it?
Yes.
That's it. And this case that Okiya Omtata represented the courts, it was deemed urgent, and the courts were well aware of that, isn't it?
You see, in the first submission,
yes,
Okiya Omtata submitted to the court requesting for conservatory orders to stay the parliament, the Speaker of the Parliament, from submitting the bill for an assent to the President. But then the court did not issue those conservatory orders. So the bill was submitted to the President and the President assented, and that bill was to come to execution on the 1st of July.
Some of those clauses were supposed to actually come into
So
execution.
later on, Umtata requested for other stay orders, telling the court that some of the events on the initial submission were overtaken by events. So he requested for new orders to bar the executive from implementing the finance bill.
That's it, because the president essentially moved to make it into an act, isn't it? That's why when late and submitted said, now since it's been made into an act now, can you stop the implementation?
We are also closing our eyes
Yes.
to the fact that
Yes.
the moment we submit a bill into a Senate,
Yes.
okay, there are so many background processes that are working in place to see to its implementation, so that upon arrival of the first date of July, which is the first date of the financial year, everything comes to play. Okay, so APRA and all these other organizations were working at the background, so that on the 1st of July, all statutory obligations have been met.
Essentially been met,
yes,
isn't it? And
exactly.
since we're saying that the president is a listening president, and that's exactly what Betty is saying, and we do not disagree. If you are a listening president, we also cognizant of the fact that he didn't have to sign it. It could essentially sit in his desk for 2 weeks, and then becomes essentially law. Yeah, that's what the law states.
I would like,
Yes.
you are veering off the constitution.
Just hold on, just hold
Just
on.
a minute.
Dan,
Yes.
just hold on. Let me cross over to
quite
Dan.
fair.
Yes.
It's quite fair.
Yes.
Sometimes to understand how the government processes work.
Yes.
And that's why I said it's fair to the government sometimes that some of these policies or some of these laws, there's always a process like the one you're mentioning about IPRA, revising on the charges. I think on the prices for fuel and all these commodities, by the time probably the decision or the ruling was made in court, probably there were processes that were happening within IPRA. And I know probably from your position is to put the government in trust to explain why probably that was not communicated to the public to understand, even in the background of a court decision. I think that I agree fairly that it takes government consultation sometimes to bring back and make the public understand some of these decisions.
Yes,
however,
Dan, I do agree with whatever you say,
yes.
and every Kenyan agrees with whatever it is you're saying. Are you also aware that within that review there were some 2 levies that were supposed to be factored in that weren't factored in?
That's what I'm saying. I'm quite aware of what you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. That is quite important. If Betty is for the opinion, Danton for the opinion that we need to be cognizant, of the fact that sometimes we give government to make decisions on some of these particular processes. Then the better thing is also to look and watch out of those decisions. Probably internal consultation. My point of departure, however, and this is what I've been consistent about, that it is quite insensitive to make the public want to make the public understand that you continue paying taxes, for example, or you are expected to pay taxes, and unfairly the government is not putting into measures to safeguard the delivery and the value that comes with these taxes. And let me tell you that we do not have Kenyans. Reading the mood of Kenyans do not have a problem in paying of the taxes. What Kenyans are questioning is irregular payment of taxes, punitive taxes. And I think from these, it's quite, to use the least word, is quite ignorant for us or anyone in the government, and I keep on repeating for fairly, to make sure, to think that probably Kenyans will understand that we need to make them feel that they should be paying taxes or they should be abiding by the government policies, while the government officials are taking detour, are taking a separate, different path towards making sure that Kenyans Kenyans believe that they're actually abiding by these rules. And let me say this, I agree with what Betty said. We are not lawyers. Probably we do not have that in-depth understanding of these particular laws, but I think it is quite unfair, for example, to make us understand or make us want to understand that you can sneak into some of these provisions, these acts or these particular amendments in a manner that is not procedural, in a manner that is not consistent with the law. And this is what I've asked my colleague, probably Offset, to make me understand. Even if you do want to bring an act of government or act of parliament in the parliament, how would you do that? Minus probably looking at the tenets of the law. And this is what we are coming even in the morning to discuss. This is why we'll come back again and say, because the courts, the judges are watching in silence for the political class making those blunders in the legislature, including what was quoted in the ruling that was done yesterday on the blunder that a speaker made on the House. And this is it, as I conclude. There are measures that can be taken to cushion some of these things and some of this ruling that has come. And you could hear some of these tones. That one, we can go to the parliament. Probably because the understanding is, while in parliament, the majority has got their way, the minority has their say.
No, sir.
Who has the majority in the parliament? Another blunder that we keep on mentioning. You also say that, you see, we still have a long time. And this, give the government time. I agree, for the purposes of fairness, give the government time. But it is the same government who actually made a statement and said, once we lift our Bibles and the Bibles comes down, some of these drastic measures will be taken. It is the same government officials from the top who's been making public pronouncement that, you see, this has to be done drastically. The next week, you see, taking a detour decision. So the major thing is that the eternal vigilance within the citizens must be heightened, because some of these decisions cannot be given to government in the position alone.
Yes.
Some of these decisions must be fast-tracked by an active citizen. I agree with what Betty is saying. We must have an active citizenry that is very objective. The word objective to it, that public participation is not just a tokenism, that public participation must be meaningful, that inclusion is not just a tokenism, it must be meaningful. That separation of powers as envisioned in the Constitution must not be an issue that is just on paper, it must be on practice.
Pretty much. So once we come back, Danton, I just want us to go for this break. Give Betty some time again now, because we're going to go into the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes of our conversation this morning. It is, so now, what next then? There's 50 of them, and we do know that they were hell-bent on coming in our office and also shaking the president's hands as I will say, thank you, we're going to deliver for you. Where do they go? Once we come back right here on the Morning Drift, and also answer the question, if you're saying it's a bit too early for us to start questioning this government, then is it okay for us to start questioning the mistakes they're repeating from the previous government's regime, which they are trying to correct? Once we come back right here on the Morning Drift.
Are you a junior secondary school, a college, a TVET institution or a university, and you want to advertise your intake? Book now and advertise with us today on both Lookuptv and all our digital platforms. Call us today on 011 0430 158, 011 0430 158, or email us on sales@lookuptv.co.ke.
Assalamu alaikum. Siku ya leo tuko katika kaunti ya Kwale. Takriban watu 800 leo watapokea usaidizi wetu kwa hisani ya Loto Foundation. Kwa hivyo ambatana na mimi siku ya leo tuone hali vipi.
Iko mbaya sana baba. Iko mbaya hali. Iko mbaya. Njaa tu.
Tunashukuru kwa grupu ya Tuliani Kayamba.
Nashukuru kupata msaada kidogo, unaweza kunisaidia kidogo.
Waizidi na imani hiyo.
Asante sana kwa Loto, manake imebadilisha maisha, imetugusia maisha yetu, na leo tunalala watu tofauti.
Na mbona kasheni, nashukuru na Mungu akubarikieni.
As long as we go with that theme that ukicheza kila mtu ni mshindi, we will also continue to support.
Kwanza na wafurahikia sana, nataka tena wakija wanikumbuke mimi mzee wao.
Thank you for your help. Together, we are changing lives.
KM Lookup Media, the holding company for Muthingi and Lookuptv, proudly presents the Mount Kenya Region Roadshow. It's time to mark your calendars, because from the 4th to the 8th of July, we are bringing the excitement to Kiambu, Murang'a, Kirinyaga, Embu, Meru, Laikipia, Nyeri, Nyandarua, and Nakuru counties. Are you ready to be a part of an electrifying TV roadshow? Join us as we embark on a thrilling journey through the magnificent Mount Kenya region. Lookuptv and Mudingi TV are hitting the road. We are coming straight to your towns. But that's not all. We are not just bringing you TV. We are bringing you an unforgettable experience. Enjoy your favorite comedians like Njoro wa Ukulima ni Mali, Marafiki, among others, live performances, and get a chance to meet your favorite TV personalities right in your own town. To our sponsors and partners, book your slot for the greatest brand experience and conversions. To book this fast-moving opportunity, call 0110-430-158 or email sales@lookuptv.co.ke. Get ready to be swept off your feet as we bring the magic of television to your doorstep. Let the TV adventure begin.
Let's then end this particular conversation this morning like this. I'm gonna take a minute and then our panel is gonna quickly answer some of those questions. I'm just gonna put them together so that now we can get through them correctly. Thank you very much, Nelvish, for watching us from Nakuru this morning. You're saying this, could you ask Betty why it now looks as if President Ruto is losing popularity within his party, because majority of those ones who were supposed to be given the CS positions essentially joined him to campaign for him for a gift bus. All right, the other question is from James. James from Nakuru. Again, Nakuru this morning, you're watching. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And this is a question to Betty as well. And this is saying this, good, what next now for even the heavyweights who are supposed to be awarded the CAS positions? Do you feel they're going to join the other camp? Because now there's more leeway than ever. Good. All right. Danton, this is the question that essentially is a bit different from the ones that have been asked to Betty. Your question is, why didn't President Ruto then send that particular bill back to Parliament? All right. So that Parliament could give him a solution if you are calling him a listening president. That's a question that has been asked by James Okari from Kisii. Thank you very much. All right, Daniel, I'm not seeing a question from OROGO. If a question comes in, then we're going to put it to you. Good. All right, Betty, we open with you. And even as you respond to that, I want you to tie it with this then. If the question is that Ruto is well-intentioned, then should we be talking about telling the president, relax, do not make the mistakes you're making right now. It is too early for you to do that.
Thank you. And thanks to the questions from my fellow Kenyans. Those questions, in my view, border on the political implication of the court ruling of yesterday regarding the 50 CASs. So here is the thing. As a member of the UDA party, I can tell you for free that the UDA party is stable, it's very strong, haiyumbi-yumbi, na haita anza kuyumba-yumba because of a court ruling. This is not the first court ruling, it is not the last that perhaps might impact decisions, of the current administration. But of course, we take it in our strides to learn and to reflect and to move forward. They always say that serikali ni nyumba kubwa. Serikali ni nyumba kubwa. So if the question is about just these individuals getting positions, that's really not an issue. I mean, positions are still there to be gotten. But here's the thing. The role of the CS as envisioned by the Public Service Commission, one of the key roles was to be the interface, the political interface between the executive and Parliament, all right? Hence, the choice, perhaps, of the individuals who had been nominated to be CASs in the first place, and I will leave it at that. These are people who were in the Kenya Kwanza space, which eventually formed, the government. So I don't see why somebody would think that because I didn't get CAS, so I'm gonna, jump ship and go, to the other side. So like I told you, the president, in his goodwill, to these particular individuals and to Kenyans who qualified for that position, he did his part, right? And then the decision not to buy it was not the president's decision. It was the court's decision. And of course, the president is also expected, in his goodwill, as a Kenyan first and foremost, then as head of state, to consider this particular ruling, of yesterday, and within the context of the rule of law,
yes,
determine his next moves on this particular issue within the context of the law. So that is what I would say regarding the responding to the questions.
That's it. Now, I want you to respond to this one. Even indeed, we're saying the president is well-intentioned. We did point out he wants to even freeze the adding of salaries of top officials within his government. Why are we not talking about the mistakes that he's making that are essentially a mere copy of the previous regime that he essentially saying he wants to correct?
I wouldn't call them mistakes.
What would you
I would call them decisions. That if you disagree with it, it's you disagreeing with it. That doesn't mean it's a mistake. A mistake is something that is criminal, goes against the law, and can be, taken to prosecution.
Like what we're talking about right now. Yes.
So taking a decision as head of state,
yes,
how is that a mistake? This is a head of state, all right, duly elected, in office legally.
Yes.
This is a head of state who has a team,
yes,
of advisors around him. This is a head of state who is also a politician. Don't lose that fact. Also a politician whose job is to manage the politics of the country,
yes,
so that we are peaceful to move about, doing our day-to-day lives. In just 7 months, just how many mistakes can one individual make as head of state?
And that's the question.
Those are mistakes because you define it, yes, as a mistake.
A mistake is just
you define it, yes, as a mistake.
Yes.
But when he is taking that decision, he has the entire Kenya on his head. He knows that if I take this decision, this is the potential consequence. All right? Every decision has consequences. And I learned this clearly even in the Miss President show.
Yes.
That no matter what decision you take, it has consequences. Can be positive, negative.
Yes.
But there's no decision that will be good for everybody, everywhere, even in your own house.
Yes.
You take decisions, some of your kids will flow with you.
Yes.
Some will say, Daddy Hapo, you're on your own.
Betty, when we see RUTO, don't we see presidency? Don't we see the constitution? Don't we see that?
We see that, and everything he has done is within the law.
So are we right?
Is within the law.
Are we right not to see the constitution in this? I don't want to call it mistake anymore because, Betty, you're not telling me you don't want me to call it mistake.
For example, let me just jump in. One of the mistakes, according to you, that you highlighted earlier,
yes,
was the finance bill in the first place.
That's it.
All right?
Yes.
Now, was there not a finance bill in this country? There has been.
There has been.
And that is the basis of a budget and running a government.
That's it. There has to be by every April.
What happened was a revision of an existing bill, an existing legislation. Is that not true?
The punishment.
Now, tell me where the president went wrong.
The president went wrong in the sense he has been told, you've done everything right, but then hold on. Then you go right ahead and make the mistake which you're getting punished for right now for not listening to an authority within the constitution. Betty, that's what I'm saying. It's a mistake. Should we be talking about these mistakes that we're saying here? One, do you agree that indeed, if you're going to call it a mistake, if you're going to call it the wrong decision, let me use your word, for President Uhuru Kenyatta, is that at one point it became ungovernable. Stop listening. Would you say that?
On that one, I will depart from you very fast and very sharply because we have a listening president. You can accept it, you can deny it. That's really your choice.
Yes.
All right? But a president who says, because of what he has in his hands and his vision for this country, all right, is to, for example, reconsider sections, aspects of an existing legislation. And what does he do? What he does is that he follows due process.
Yes.
Wasn't that conversation in Parliament according to the standing orders of that house or of both houses,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Didn't we follow proceedings online?
Yes.
And we saw eventually how it ended. All right?
Yes.
It was voted by who? By Kenyans. By virtue of your MP voting yes or no. It was voted by Kenyans. That is why we have Parliament. Everybody in this country is represented by somebody. At your ward, at your in both houses of Parliament, and in the county, and Kenyans and Kenya at large. So whether your representative said yes or no, that's not the issue. The issue is you were represented there. So it is Kenyans who voted it. So how come this process takes forever? It follows due process as stipulated by the law, and then when there's a final outcome, it is presented to the head of state in his capacity as head of state to either say yes, no, return it, or ignore it.
Yes.
He takes a decision.
Yes.
How is that wrong? And he's just doing his job. For me, what is key is, Simba,
Yes.
let us figure out ways that we can cushion Kenyans. And the government is making effort. There are food stamps, food baskets to those who don't completely have food, and we know this. We are seeing the program for cheap fertilizers and so on that is available to any Kenyan who wants to make use of it, so that we can grow enough food, and again within the context of the broader climate change, which is a global issue, not just a Kenyan issue.
Right. Danton, I want to bring you in, and I want you to respond to that question on exactly, if we're saying that he's a listening president, you like to think that the president was acting with advisors on this particular issue, because he doesn't act as RUTO, he acts as presidency. He's an office that is well functional. All right, just respond to that question on why he didn't go back to Parliament to seek further advice on exactly what he's supposed to do. It's a question that came to you from James in Kisii. Now, here's the thing, even as you do that, same question I'm going to put to you. Let me just define, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, then, on what a mistake is: an act or judgment that is misguided or wrong.
Okay, I would like to go ahead and answer that question.
Yes.
To put it simply,
yes.
2 wrongs don't make a right. The Speaker of the National Assembly, in his wisdom, said, as Parliament, within the constraints of the Constitution, do not have jurisdiction whatsoever to vet the CASs in Parliament. It was simply put, they did not say we don't want, they did not say it is a matter of they say we lack jurisdiction within the constraints of the Constitution. So if we do it, it will be illegal. That will be 2 wrongs which will never make a right. So the president is advised that this is an executive matter. The executive can go ahead and join hands with the PSC to take this effect. And that's what the president did.
Be clear what the Parliament told, for the sake of James. Be clear what the Parliament told the president. Wetangula was quite clear that this is your issue now.
Yes.
It stops being our issue. It looks as if every other part, just like Betty and you were telling us this morning, every other part in the appointment, the creation of this role, the appointment of the CSs, all the interviews that we did see for the CSs, they were done constitutionally, to the point that the president wanted to adhere to the law, send them back to Parliament to get vetted. He knew, Danton, he knew very well that the due process to follow is to take them to Parliament for vetting. So once that particular bill went to Parliament, here it is. Please create time as the chairman of the National House of Business, all right, to introduce this particular vetting of the CSs. Parliament spoke to him, told him, sir, we do not have this particular power according to the Kenyan Constitution to do this, isn't it? This is your issue. What could have been the next step? Is it to go appoint? That's what James is asking.
You see, if we make reference to the parliamentary standing orders, a stranger cannot stand before Parliament unless allowed by an order from the head of the parliament, who is the speaker, or the standing orders, or the constitution itself.
Pretty much.
If anything lies outside this scope, then it becomes unlawful.
Unlawful, isn't it?
Yes.
Therefore,
so the next step should have been,
yes,
okay, we make this an executive order, which is constitutional, and that is what the president did. He went the executive way, and that is why.
How different is that?
I want to put it this way. Yes. That is why, as part of the ruling, yes, the judiciary did not say we are ruling them out entirely because they did not go through parliament. It was because of other few hitches that could otherwise have avoided.
Essentially, whatever you're saying as an executive order, Danton, how different is that from this statement? I don't remember it vividly. How different is that from the executive order then for President Uhuru Kenyatta when he said, today I have decided, blah, 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 blah. How different is that? Because if you make an executive order then you'd rather eliminate PAC and the entire process of getting the CS as an office.
It is entirely different because what Uhuru Kenyatta did was entirely unconstitutional.
Then do not call it an executive.
Yes. You cannot gazette and notice as if you are above the constitution. There are limits to which an executive order can go.
Does it?
There is a limit to which the presidential powers are constrained within the laws of the land.
Yes.
And that is what this president, we are calling him a listening president, is trying as much as possible to act within the constraints of his own power.
But I want to bring in Dan so that now we rush through time.
Before you bring him in,
yes,
I wanted to answer something that Dan has asked about the Finance Act.
Yes.
Please. So I wanted to say, as much as we want to underpin the president and say the president did this wrong and that right, I don't know, we are always questioning. I would like to underpin that we are acting blind to what is inside the Finance Act. There are so many good things that are inside that act. There are so much that has been said in international media that actually that act is one of the most progressive finance acts in Africa right now. Very progressive. But the local media in Kenya will not tell you that. Instead of educating the common mwananchi of telling them that the government has removed the corporate tax for non-resident from 10% to 7.5%. That is going to bring employment. We have removed the rental withholding tax from 10% to 7.5% to encourage building and what have you. We have reduced the taxes in manufacturing. Medicine and drugs have been exempted from manufacturing tax. The media is not talking about that. And there is so much that the president, in his wisdom and good intentions of the country, has put his all intentions for the betterment of the economy at large, creating employment, betterment of the shilling, and what have you. Why are we not talking about that? We are concentrating on having 50 CSS, I don't know what. Why are we not looking at the bigger picture of the Finance Act?
Yes. When it comes to news, I will tell you that, Danton, I mean, this is a bigger conversation for another day. You can't tell the media what to focus on.
That is very sad of the media in Kenya.
You can't
Why
sit,
do we have
you can't sit
the
down.
international media saying that this is the most
Simba,
progressive Finance Act in Kenya?
Simba.
And the local media is saying the Finance Act has increased the
housing
allowance.
Yes, Daniel, I'm going to come to you, by the way.
We have reduced the Finance Act into the housing fund.
That's it. No, hold on.
We have over hundreds of clauses in the Act.
It's because you choose some of the stories that you've chosen then to focus on in the media that have been carried in the Finance Act is the negative stories. And news for us.
How do we build a nation by focusing on the negative?
I've just made a gruesome mistake on air. There is no negative story. And I keep on...
thank you for that.
And I keep on saying, well, they're negative stories. There are no negative stories. A story is a story. I'm not going to sit here and tell you about a story that I don't think makes news to me, because every profession has got its guidelines.
Exactly.
Yeah. Housing fund is not the housing fund.
Failed on
Housing fund, 50 CSS is not a negative story, Dan. It's just a story that makes news according to the guidelines of what a news story is.
One clause in a finance act that has hundreds of acts.
Daniel, I'm going to come. I want to take 2 minutes then, respond to this, and then after that, I'll be picking closing sentiments on the planned Sabasaba demonstrations. Dan, should we be talking about mistakes then too early in a government that has not taken time in office, that should be essentially correcting the wrongs that happened in the previous regime?
He who do not understand, those pitfalls in history are bound to repeat them.
Yes.
And in my opening remarks, I said my assessment is fair. I started from Kibaki's government in constitutional blunders to Uhuru's and to now Ruto's.
Yes.
I think I gave that on a fair assessment and say that, you see, there's a blatant consistency in violating the rule of law. And that is why, we are here discussing about this. My colleagues do not really want to take it kind for us when we tell them that some of these things are mistakes that people are doing. And I agree, the president is surrounded by probably some of the most top-notch advisors, legal advisors, economic advisors, security, matter of security and regional stability. But the issue is, are they advising him correctly? That is the issue that we are asking here. Because the mistakes are too much in the early part of the regime. Promises not delivered, not good communication. A finance bill that majority of Kenyans have rejected and has been bulldozed in the National Assembly passed, being assented into it, it's just too much. The citizens are speaking to the president in other terms. The petitions and number of submissions that were made in public participation to the select committee,
yes,
they were made there. Professionals, people who probably are way above us. The Media Owners Association, the aviation industry, the legal fraternity, people who are professionals. If there's this thing that I'm hearing that the president listens, if indeed he was a listening president, if he's not listening from political pundits like us, there were professionals advising there in the submissions. That public participation in the select committee was purely objective. It was not political, right? So if indeed we have a listening president as being put on the panel today in other quarters, he should have listened for that part. And let's give it also fair, because I know there are suggestions that will come and say, it is out of that public participation that certain amendments were given to the clause. And it came back with amendments, so the president listens. And I'm saying that is not much. There's still the public that are arm in arms complaining about some of these punitive taxes. And let me say this, and you've corrected this, we have this obsession with certain quarters about what is going on in the public discourses. That is within the public court of public opinion. The media picks it up from there. And some of us are angry because you guys are not doing what they expect. And I would like to tell you, continue educating the citizens. You don't have to take any political sides, not the opposition, nor the government. Give the citizens objective platform conversation. If the opposition fails to articulate their issues in an open forum like that, it is not your mistake. If the government cannot explain to the public about the many numerous clauses that are in the finance bill, it is not your mistake. It is them failing to explain. It is them failing to articulate their issues. It should not be lampooned on the local media or international media. That is not your mistake. That is whoever it is, with the opposition or civil society or the government. So that's what I need to clarify at this particular set. And once again, I'm saying that if we have the benefit of talking to the citizens of the Republic of Kenya, that we make sure that our assessment stands the test of time. That if tomorrow, for example, I am in government, those clips can be played and say, Dan, you are in Lookuptv such and such a date in this year. You said this. Is it consistent with what is it? And that's what I'm saying. There is no way we can argue about the rule of law. No way. Whether it's a living document, whether it's subject to like a novel, there is no way that we can misinterpret the rule of law. As I conclude, there are separation of powers in this country, and that is what is envisioned by the framers of the Constitution. Even if the president has got supreme or appointive decisions, there is no way that would be veered off from the provisions of the law. It is not. We will come back and still explain why the court rules, and the court has to be a custodian of the Constitution and the rule of law, whether we like it or not. Azimio did not like it in the presidential petition, right? They were up in arms, but they said, we as opposition, we do not, maybe we are not in agreement, but we respect the ruling of the law. This current regime also said that they might not really, be in agreement with the law, but they have to abide by what the rule of law says and what the Constitution or the court say. This is where it is.
Pretty much. All right, Betty, I'm going to give you 1 minute because we're at the tail end of our conversation this morning. Just this 1 minute. Let's drift a little bit away from the cases for the CAs and all that. Let's look at exactly what's going on in the opposition. Raila Amolo Odinga has said now it's going to be Saba that has no definite end until they see the changes they're calling for from the Kenya Kwanza government. What's your stand on that? Just take 1 minute so I give you also to Dunstan so we can complete.
Thank you very much, and gratitude for having me here today. Before I get into that, allow me to say this. That you disagree with my decision does not make my decision wrong. A decision is decision. You can disagree, you can agree, but disagreeing with my decision doesn't make it a wrong decision. Now, to Saba, for me, if the cry really is about high cost of living and so on, yes, the Constitution allows us, and that's a very powerful power that Kenyans have in the Constitution, to peaceful picketing and so on. But we know from even just recent experiences that it's never peaceful. It's peaceful by mouth, but in reality, you wake up in the morning, people fear to come to the CBD, if it is in Nairobi, to open their shops, women are fearing, and so on. That means a whole day worth of income lost. The same income we are crying for, right? We have seen that within the context of this picketing of theirs, it opens up room for violence, for chaos, for unruliness. We've seen just matatus being attacked and people's things being snatched. We've seen, crowds and walking into shops and just, breaking it up and taking things. And these are the same people who are just trying to make a living for that particular day for themselves and their families. So for me, while we exercise our right to peaceful demonstration and so on, every right has a responsibility that goes with it. The president himself, I think last Sunday or in some church service recently, said they're welcome to gather and to say whatever it is, whatever it is that they want to say. But violence in the context of picketing is not going to be allowed. I would really beg and plead with the Azimio side. Go back to the bipartisan talks. Those doors are open.
Thank you very much, Danson. You got 30 seconds. My director is killing me. We got to get out of the studio, please.
Position is not clear on what they want from the demonstrations. They say we want to open the servers. They say we don't recognize this government, and then they come again and say the same government that we don't recognize, we want them to reduce the cost of living. That's impractical. It's so hard to comprehend on what they exactly want. But on the same note, I would be on the same note. I would go on record to say that if they go the same way, let them come to the drawing board and say, this is what we want.
That's it. Pretty much. Done. 15 seconds, please. On the planned Saba demonstrations, what is your sentiment on it? Just take 15 seconds after you speak. I won't speak.
I mean, it's like Betty said, picketing is all right.
That's it.
But I think we should be devoid of distractions. And banning people's property or stealing. So I think for me it's just a responsibility. And I don't know why there was a collapse of the bipartisan talk, but I think the other side is driving from their own opinion why that was the talks. But I would still feel that it's important that there could be a dialogue and a conversation on matters that are important to this country.
Pretty much. We're going to end it there. Betty, Dunston, and Dan, Thank you very much for coming by. Should you back, guys. You know, it's like we just touched the tip of the service. But guess what? Take them back to the time that you joined us right here on Lookuptv online. That's at Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. For all those who kept on sending me questions and comments and likes on our live platform this morning, thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow for another session. Good morning and goodbye.